Welcome to the Vale, where the paranormal is our playground. As you can see, we're not at the studio today.
Nope.
We are actually at my house. This is a special Creeps and Cocktails, maybe, I guess you could call it fireside, maybe. No fire, but Creepy Dolls.
Creepy Dolls, yes.
The one in the middle here is Abigail. We've had activity from her, so that's interesting.
She's our adoptive daughter, apparently.
Yeah,
I'm stuck with her.
But today Leah has prepared a Creeps and Cocktails edition on a Edward Edwards. So
Edward Edwards is my guy.
Ed Eds.
We're going to be doing an Ed Eds today.
Okay,
So first we got to start with our cocktail, though.
Yes, we do.
And in order to celebrate a little bit of St. Patrick's Day that just passed this last week, Monday, we decided to do a little take on a Irish cream. So it's Bailey's, excuse me, chocolate milk, and 1 scoop of vanilla. And what was the name of this?
This is the s'mores.
The s'mores, yes.
I saw this on Facebook, actually, and thought it sounded interesting.
So that's what we made.
Yep.
So we will enjoy our s'mores Bailey's cocktail as we discuss Mr. Edwards.
So if you would like to pause this and go make your own, feel free.
It would taste much better had I not just had a cough drop.
Yes, we're both a little under the weather here, so if we do not sound right, we apologize. But
yeah. But we wanted you to make sure that you got your Creeps and Cocktails in this month, and I was very excited to talk about it. So we're just going to go with Leah's voice sounding like she's dying today.
Yes.
Okay.
And me sounding nasally.
Yeah.
So
we're a good pair today, aren't we?
Yeah. So
good team.
It is what it is.
We have exactly 1 week to get better.
Yes.
Because next week, Friday, we are leaving for an investigation. So we need to get better. We both went to the urgent care. We both saw doctors. We both got the same medications. We're definitely the team.
We are a team.
Yeah.
So if I cough here and there, I apologize.
Same here. As he's doing. Yep. Nothing better than being sick together as a team, right?
It is. It's awesome. So
all right.
So let's do we want to dive into this Edward Edwards?
Edward Edwards. Let's talk about Edward. All right, so Edward is the unknown serial killer. Very common phrase for him. He was born in June 14th of 1933 in Akron, Ohio. His original name was Charles Edward Myers, born to Lillian Myers. Now, Lillian, unfortunately, was a single mother who had Edward when she was single, alone, and at the height of the Great Depression, again, 1933. So, probably not the best time for kids. She was having some rough times, we'll put it that way. So as a child of just 2 to 5 years old, Edward, now again, we're going to depend on the source because I've looked up multiple sources and some sources say that he was 2 when this happened, other ones say 3, other ones say 4, and then there's one that said 5. So to just round it off, I said as a child of 2 to 5 years old, depending on the source, Edward did witness his mother commit suicide by a gunshot wound to her stomach. So depending on how old he was, is when he was sent into the orphanage. He was placed in the Catholic orphanage in 1940. So just given that information, if it was 1940 that he was placed into the orphanage and he was born in 33, that makes him a whole lot older than 2 or 5.
Yeah.
But again, there's so many resources out here about Edward that I do believe some of the dates kind of vary.
Okay.
So after her death, he was placed into the Catholic orphanage, and he was abused by older boys, beaten by nuns, mentally abused during punishments. So Edward reported that he was a victim of sexual assault as well as all the other abuses. He was kicked out of the orphanage for uncontrollable behaviors of rage.
Or was it because he complained?
Could be both.
Okay.
And he was diagnosed as a sadomasochist after 8 years of living there. So let's just say he went there when he was 2. Let's just say the younger age.
So that would have been 1935.
And he was at the orphanage for 8 years. So he would have been about 10 when they kicked him out. Right. So we're looking at an age range of like somewhere 8, 10, 11, 12, somewhere in there. They kicked him out of the orphanage and diagnosed him with this crazy sadomasochism. Now, what is that? That is actually a pleasure from inflicting pain as well as a pleasure from receiving pain.
Okay.
So I would say that's a pretty heavy diagnosis to give to a kid of about 10 years old.
10 years to 13 years.
So
based on your source, but if you went in 1948 years, he would have been like 15 then.
Which puts him a little too old because, and I'll explain in a little bit about the stuff he did as a teenager too. Okay. So we needed some time there. So he's diagnosed with this crazy sadomasochism.
Okay.
Does that to me already seems like a system going wrong. Now we are looking at 1930s and the 1940s. Understandably, we don't know as much about psychotherapy as we do now. Who knows if this was even a diagnosis that they knew anything about to begin with. But he was sent to reformatory school for 2 years after being kicked out of the orphanage. So not a therapeutic rehabilitation. Let's try to get preventative measures in here. Obviously, he's a risk at this point with his fits of rage, which could likely be from, I don't know, seeing his mother shoot herself and getting beat on by kids and nuns. Yep. Had something to do with it, I'm sure.
One of the three at least did.
But instead of helping, we're just going to send him to a reform school.
Okay.
After 2 years of that, he ran off and began a life of crime, getting into trouble with police, sent him to juvenile detention, in and out all through his teenage years.
Okay.
To get out of detention, at the age of 17, the judge stated he can join the army or whatever field there, or stay in detention.
Okay.
He chose to join the Marines.
I mean, that was a common thing at that time, though.
Sure.
So, a choice to join the military or go to jail, that was a common thing. And, I mean, they do train you to be somebody different than you go in. So, I mean, I guess, but he was already kind of trained to do what you need to do and more.
Right. So, he joined the Marines, but I would say he left. He went AWOL. He was living in the Marine base at Camp.
So AWOL.
Camp what?
Camp Lejeune.
There you go.
I was stationed there. AWOL. What are you talking about when you say AWOL for the people who do not?
Oh, sorry.
Get the military lingo that we use?
Absent without leave.
Okay.
Meaning he ran away. They couldn't find him.
Right.
You have to ask permission to leave camp or base whenever you're in the military. You can have passes and things like that, but you can't just like walk off the base one day and just not come back. That's right. That's not how this works.
You have to show back up to work.
Right.
Like you can go out in town by base, but you can't like just disappear and not come back.
Right. It's not like you can give a 2-week notice.
Right.
It doesn't work that way. So he didn't like Camp Lejeune, and he felt like that's just not the life he wanted, so he just didn't go back.
Okay.
He was arrested for burglary, robbery, and car theft. At which point the military was like, yeah, bye. And they dishonorably discharged him.
Okay.
In 1952, in Jacksonville, Florida, Edward stole a car and attempted to impersonate a Marine. He was arrested and sentenced to a federal reformatory for several years. Now we kind of skip up to 1955, so about 3 years later, in Idaho Falls, Idaho, Edward killed his 17-year-old pregnant girlfriend named Verna Doe. So in Edward's book, and we'll get to his book later, explains getting rid of her in Denver after kidnapping another woman named Jeanette White in Idaho. Jeanette White was interviewed in 2011, and she stated she met Verna just before Edward killed her. So great track record already, right? In 1955, in Montana, so notice how we're getting around here. We got Idaho, Florida, now we're in Montana. Edward got popped for break-in and an attempt of robberies in Portland, Oregon. So he was in Oregon, did some robberies, attempted some break-ins, ran to Montana, got it there, but he slipped out of jail. And then he was living as a fugitive until the cops got him for a string of armed robberies and forged checks years later.
Okay.
While he was apprehended, he was questioned for the murders of Larry Payton and Beverly Allen, though he was not convicted of them. Okay, so this will come up later, but just know that he was originally questioned about them, meaning there was some suspicion to a double homicide, but not enough to convict him. So in 1960, somewhere in there, he escaped again, and then in 1961, he was added to FBI's top 10 most wanted list.
I mean, he got on a list.
I mean, if that's a list you aspire to get to, there you go.
I mean, that is a... I don't know what you call that.
At some point before his arrest or while he was a fugitive, it's really unknown when this happened, but he married a woman named Marlene. And in 1962, he was caught because he was on the run, and she was with him. They were arrested in Atlanta, Georgia. So again, notice how he's just getting all over the place.
Was Marlene arrested with him?
Yes. And that's where her story kind of ends in a lot of the sources. So I don't know what happened to her after all that.
So being with him, she probably was taken in too, and then maybe she didn't do anything, so she was released.
And probably at some point divorced him while he was arrested because he remarried later. So
unless he's one of the Mormon type.
He sure wasn't.
Okay.
Was he anything? I don't even know. He was sentenced to 16 years in Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary, where he allegedly met an unidentified prison guard who turned his life around. This prison guard worked some magic. Convenient. And after being paroled from Lewisburg Federal Penitentiary in 1967, he became an inspirational speaker and remarried. He married Kay at this time.
Okay.
So he was a speaker. Now we were talking about his book. So in 1972, he wrote an autobiography about himself titled The Metamorphosis of a Criminal, the True Life Story of Ed Edwards.
Huh.
So he described his career in criminal activities, influential factors that led him to pursuing such a career, his recovery process, and then during and after his federal incarceration, and talked about how him and his wife joined the foster family system, so they become foster parents.
Interesting. I mean, great candidate.
Yeah. Dishonorably discharged, robberies, escape, running, fugitive, top 10 most wanted list of the FBI, suspect in a double homicide.
Yeah, 16 years in Leavenworth, but he's reformed.
He is reformed, and therefore should be given a chance of being a foster parent. We'll discuss later what the hell. So, Edward also became like a successful media personality, regularly getting profiled in newspapers, magazines. He was a guest on the TV game show To Tell the Truth in 1972, which is quite ironic given what truth he's not telling.
Yeah. Yeah.
Found out a lot about him. But
Just-
I don't think he came out in the open with any of that until much later. So, interesting truth.
Okay.
Now that my cough drop is gone, this drink is actually really good. Okay. So in 1977 in Ohio, we're going to discuss kind of a disappearance that happened. Okay. So William Lavaco and his 18-year-old girlfriend, Judy Straub, were reported as missing.
Okay. How old was William?
19. Oh,
Okay.
I'm sorry, 21. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
21-year-old William Lavaco and then his 18-year-old girlfriend.
Okay.
On August 8th of that same year, 1977, both of their bodies were found, having been shot in the neck at point-blank range. Now, the case remained cold, and Edward, who was in the area at the time, ran.
Okay. Wait. So they were shot in the neck.
In the neck, point-blank range.
Okay. That seems like a very specific
Found in a
place.
car.
But the neck seems like a very specific thing.
So 3 years later, Edward was working in Jefferson County, Wisconsin at the Concord House as a handyman. If you live in Wisconsin or know anything about Wisconsin, Jefferson is about an hour west from from Milwaukee County. And Watertown is the area where the Concord House is, which is like Concord, Wisconsin, but Watertown is like the general area.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll kind of get into this a little bit later, but Jefferson County is a county I used to work for in youth justice. And so everything that we talk about when it comes to this murder, it's odd talking about it because I have a lot of firsthand knowledge of where all of this stuff is and know that I've been there a few times. So it's like, yes, I know the Concord House. I am well aware of where the bodies were found. Been through that area quite a few times. So, and funny enough is when Edward was caught, he was defended by an attorney who I worked with in human services as well. So when I was going through the articles, I'm like, oh, Attorney De La Rosa, I know him. I used to work with him. So it was just kind of interesting to kind of connect all of this stuff. And to know that that attorney worked on such a huge case, serial killer case. Crazy.
Yeah.
So Edward was working in Jefferson County at the Concord House as a handyman. On August 9th in 1980, Timothy Hack and his girlfriend Kelly Drew were seen around 11 p.m. attending a wedding reception at the Concord House. They were never seen after leaving that party and were reported missing on August 10th. Their bodies were found by squirrel hunters. Squirrel?
Is that where the dead squirrel comes from?
Maybe. I know, you're the one that named it.
Yeah.
So they were found by squirrel hunters on October 19th, 1980. Timothy was found to be stabbed and Kelly was found to be sexually assaulted and strangled. Her pants, bra, and panties were found shredded on a road nearby. After news of the bodies being found and police were starting to ask questions of the staff of the Concord House, Edward packed up his family and they left the state before they had a chance to talk to Edward, and the case turned cold.
Interesting. Coincidental.
Very. Now, the last known murder that provided a sentence of death to Edward was that of his, sadly, foster son. Because, putting him in the foster family was such a great idea.
Oh, yes.
It angers me. It angers me a lot.
Probably why he shouldn't have been a foster dad.
Yes, this angers me immensely.
Excuse me.
So, their foster son is named Danny Boy Edwards. He did have a different name, but he was so close to Ed and looked up to Ed as a father that he wanted Edward to adopt him. The judge never agreed to adoption, and Danny stayed in the family as a foster child, but changed his name to Danny Boy Edwards.
Danny Boy.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Oh, Danny Boy. It's an Irish song. Never mind.
Yeah. I mean,
so
okay.
in a 2010 interview, this is just, it's disgusting, but Edward was interviewed in 2010 in jail, and he explained that he planned to talk Danny into joining the Army, as then Danny would then be eligible for the $250,000 life insurance. So it wasn't to better Danny's life or anything like that. Edward was already scheming on how to get more money. That was his life. He was a con artist. He went place to place, worked with different people, always tried to get more money and how to better his standing in life. And here he turns to his foster son and talks him into joining the Army, knowing that Danny would then be able to cash in on the $250,000 life insurance. Danny didn't want to join the Army. And when he joined, he learned he would be deploying to Kuwait, and then expressed his even more desire to not want to be in the Army. So Edward devised a plan and talked Danny into coming back home, and he would hide him from the Army. Therefore, Danny would go AWOL from the Army.
Well, I mean, if anybody knows how to do it,
You're right.
he's already done this, so he
Right.
can really give directions.
Correct. So Danny did agree, and he came back home. Only Edward would drive him to a secluded location, shot him in the face twice, and left him in a shallow grave that was later found by hunters.
So this time the face, not the neck.
Correct.
Oh.
Edward was questioned by police, but no charges were filed. Edward collected on the life insurance, and he stated in the interview in 2010, quoted, "It didn't work on my conscience. I spent the money. I was having a good time." He continues by saying, "You're coming up with crime. You learn that you do it. You forget it. It's done. And you go about your business until the next time. That's the way I was raised."
Oh. I mean, that's sweet.
So he had zero conscience about what he did to his foster son that looked up to him so much and didn't care. As he said, he spent the money. He was having a good time.
Okay.
Okay.
Wow.
So Edward then became inactive for his known killings. In 2009, police traced him back to the murders of Hack and Drew, arresting him on July 30th. Hack and Drew were the ones that were in Jefferson County.
Mm-hmm.
It's also called the Sweetheart Murders,
Okay.
if you're ever looking for it. He then contacted Ohio authorities and confessed to the murder of Danny Boy, as well as the Lavaco Straub double homicide that he was questioned for over a decade earlier. On June 9th, 2010, he agreed to plead guilty to all murders except that of Danny Boy.
But he can. Okay.
Yeah.
So he had a change of heart
Yeah.
on that one.
So
for
during
some
his
reason?
incarceration, during his trial, his health fell and he became to suffer from diabetes and other illnesses to the point where he briefly needed an oxygen mask. Kind of the way I'm feeling right now.
Yeah, the inhaler's not really doing much for me.
Inhalers kind of, I mean, it works, but I have to be connected to it.
It works, and they say take it so often, and
yeah,
does not last the whole time.
So we've got some fun lung illnesses going on.
Yeah.
Okay, so after the trial, which took place in Ohio, Edwards was found guilty of the Lavaco Straub murders, sentenced to life in prison. He then was also sentenced to life in prison for the Sweetheart murders.
Okay.
So he had 2 life sentences. But then he was also sentenced to death by lethal injection on March 8th, 2011 for Danny's murder. This sentence was issued by a 3-judge panel in Guajia.
So
I can't really say the name.
So dumb question.
Yeah.
The other murders didn't warrant death penalty, but Danny Boy warranted death penalty. Is there like a limit on murders for death penalty? Is like one just put it over the limit or what?
He was tried in Wisconsin for the Sweetheart murders.
Oh, yeah.
Wisconsin doesn't have the
Okay, that's
death
right.
penalty. So, and for the other one,
Ohio
was just in.
is-
Was it Ohio? I don't think the other two are in Ohio, but we'll
Oh.
get into his counts later.
Okay. Well, yeah, the Ohio court.
So Ohio is where he killed Danny.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
Danny, they were like, heck yeah, death.
Okay. So they were able to.
Right.
Okay.
So the sentence, actually, I should say, Edwards declined to present any evidence that would support his defense or even ask for mercy. In fact, he was unfazed by the sentence and previously admitted that he welcomed the death penalty. However, Danny Boy's half-sister, Jayadeen Copley, I believe is how you say her name, is Jai-Dean.
Okay.
So I'm going to say Jayadeen Copley, asked the judge or the panel of judges to spare Edward's life, citing that to give him the death penalty was just giving Edward what he wanted. However, that request was turned down.
Yeah, in a way, he's asking not to have to worry about it anymore.
Right.
I guess that's how it could be seen by a victim of a family member of the victim.
Yeah. So his death was scheduled on August 31st of. Okay, scroll just a little bit. 2011. Okay. He was scheduled to die August 31st. However, on April 7th, about a month after his sentencing for Danny Boy, he died at the age of 77 of natural causes in the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections Medical Center in Columbus, Ohio.
So he wasn't even in prison. He was just in the Corrections Medical Center with his illnesses.
Well, he was in prison, but also then
Yeah.
moved over to the medical center. Yeah. And when he was doing trial for Wisconsin, he was being treated at like Waupun Correctional Medical as well. So he was sick for a long time during all of his trial. So he had leukemia, heart ailments, and diabetes. So
That's a pretty bad mix.
yeah.
Yeah.
In the aftermath of Edward's death, he was assumed by Great Falls, Montana investigator to be responsible for numerous other murders and serial killer cases, although none of the allegations have ever been confirmed to be true. So to this day, Edward's final body count remains at 5 victims.
Okay.
Okay, so we know his 5.
All right. So we know that plenty of burglaries in Akron, Ohio.
Right, so he did burglaries in Akron, Ohio, armed robberies in Montana,
Then
killing his girlfriend, who was pregnant. Yeah.
Danny Boy.
Mm-hmm. And then the 2 double homicides.
So that's actually 6.
But he never got charged for his girlfriend.
Okay.
It was just stated in his book.
Okay, so that one isn't a confirmed one technically.
Right. In addition, he had like victimless crimes such as arson fire in Pennsylvania during 1980 to 82, a period he was at large for being suspected by the police for the Hack Drew double homicide. So remember, in 1980, he fled from Wisconsin to get away from the Hack Drew double homicide.
Okay.
And in between the time that he left Wisconsin to about 1982, he kept setting fires to the places that they were staying.
Okay.
So some possible links made by this detective. Possible links. Okay. So we have an unspecified date in 1956 in Great Falls, Montana. We have a Lloyd Bogle and Patricia Kalitsky. Both were shot execution style at least 6 times.
Okay.
Another possible link
We talked about that one. Larry Payton and
right.
Beverly Allen.
Yep. So these guys come up again. Portland, Oregon. Larry Payton, Beverly Allen. Larry Payton, who was 19, was stabbed 23 times and his skull smashed. Beverly Allen, also 19, raped and strangled.
Okay.
Kind of like what happened in the Sweetheart murders.
Okay.
August 24th, 1979, in Ohio, Ricky Beard and Mary Leonard. Ricky Beard, 19,
Okay.
shot repeatedly in the chest and back. Mary Leonard, 17,
Okay.
stabbed at least once in the chest and then shot repeatedly. Notice the ages.
Okay.
He's kind of going after almost like young lovers.
Yeah. That's kind of a MO there.
Yeah. So alleged by John Cameron. So again, this is the Montana detective
Mm-hmm.
who made an independent investigation into the case of possible victims, such as Lloyd Bogle and Patricia Kalitsky.
Okay.
Okay. So in 2001,
Mm-hmm.
May 1st, Washington, D.C., a Chandra Levy, age 24, killed by unknown causes.
It's familiar, that case.
Okay. And then Columbia, Missouri, we have a Kent Heathholt, age
Something like that, yeah.
48. He was
Bludgeoned.
11 times with a tire iron
Wow.
and then strangled with his own belt.
Okay.
The only thing I see different in this case is he's 48. So a little
Yeah.
past his normal MO, but that doesn't mean that it's not true.
Okay.
Now, in addition to the suspected murders, Cameron tied Edwards to these following cases, which is crazy. Okay.
Okay.
Cameron feels that Ed Edwards is the killer of the Zodiac Killer,
Okay. Because that was never found.
the West Memphis Three, the Atlanta child murders, for which Wayne Williams is more popular suspected of committing,
Okay.
the Colonial Parkway Killer,
He did get around.
yeah, John Bonet Ramsey.
Okay.
He's linking him to John Bonet.
All right.
And then the 2001 anthrax attacks.
Okay. I mean,
So Cameron first laid out this theory in his 2014 book called It's Me, Edward Wayne Edwards, the Serial Killer You Never Heard Of, where he links the Akron, Ohio native, Edwards, among others, the Chandra Levy,
okay.
Martha Moxley, the West Memphis Three killings, Adam Walsh, which I thought was solved already.
Yeah.
The wife of Dr. Sam Shepard, whose wrongful conviction helped inspire The Fugitive, if you guys didn't know that. And here's a big one. He is linking Edward Edwards to Teresa Halbach. So those who in Wisconsin know that Stephen Avery is in jail right now and has been the subject of Making a Murder in 2015 on Netflix for killing Teresa Halbach. And he is saying he's innocent. And this detective is linking Ed Edwards to Teresa Halbach.
Which we might have to deep dive into that.
It's very interesting.
Yes.
So victim profiles right now are all over the map, like everywhere. It's even saying that he might have been involved with the Black Dahlia, where the aspiring actress Elizabeth Short was killed in Los Angeles in 1947. However, that was thousands of miles away from where the then 13-year-old Edwards was supposedly been living 2 years after he was kicked out of the orphanage in Ohio, which he was kicked out of the orphanage and then went to reformatory for 2 years, right?
Yeah.
And then just kind of left and was living this life of crime.
Yeah.
So
we don't know where.
Is it possible that he could have made his way to Los Angeles?
But do we know where he was?
We don't. So I'd like to see or get the book from Detective Cameron because I'd like to see how he ties the Black Dahlia to Edward.
Okay.
Okay. Now, Halbach, Teresa, was the last victim on the list of possible ties.
Mm-hmm.
She died in Wisconsin in 2005. Edward was 72. I'm not sure. He was in Ohio, from my understanding. He was living in Ohio by this time. But Ohio is not far from Wisconsin.
No, it's not.
People drive to Ohio and Wisconsin and back all the time. No. I don't know. Cameron. Detective Cameron insists that Edward himself laid out the framework for what became the ex-detective's life work in his 70s era autobiography, which is the Metamorphosis of a Criminal. In the book, Edwards encourages readers, don't be a crime victim, be a crime stopper. To which he also wrote about meeting the famed union leader Jimmy Hoffa, who disappeared without a trace in 1975. He actually served time with Jimmy Hoffa in 1967 in prison.
Mm-hmm.
So Detective Cameron kind of pulled up Edwards' rap sheet and discovered he's been arrested and done prison time in Billings, Montana in March of 1956. His research took him all over the country as he amassed a list of almost 100 people killed over the course of 7 decades. So some more connections he made fell more reasonably within the realm of possibility than others. The so-called Zodiac killings that plagued San Francisco between 1968 and 69 were never officially solved, though countless names have been floated.
Right.
Excuse me, that one was coming. Robert Graysmith. He's the San Francisco Chronicle cartoonist and puzzle enthusiast. Worked to decode the cipher infamously used in the 4 letters sent to the paper that were believed to be from the killer. It was an advanced theory that Arthur Lee Allen, who died in 1992, was the murderer and took his in his 1986 bestseller Zodiac. So there's already a theory out there that Arthur Lee Allen was the Zodiac killer.
Right.
But we're not sure.
Well, this goes into like, I mean, we don't even know who, what's the one over in England?
Ripper?
The
Jack
Ripper. That's never been figured out either.
Though they say they have figured it out.
Well, there's many theories.
They just recently came out with the newest theory, and they believe that they have a slam dunk now, and they know who it is. But we'll discuss that later, because that's a whole rabbit hole of things I don't believe. Okay. So the extra bizarre pieces of the puzzle started to click into place for Detective Cameron when he discovered that Edwards has been blogging on the ZodiacKiller.com starting in 2000 all the way till he was arrested in 2009 for the murders of Hack and Drew. He wrote about enlisting a colleague, a language expert, and a puzzle enthusiast named Neil Beast to help solve the cipher, and Ed Edwards fit into the Zodiac Killer's 60 eras puzzles.
Okay.
He then determined that Edwards was behind the website blackdahliasolution.org, on which he found a photo that he identified as being a 13-year-old Ed Edwards, with Elizabeth Short taken at a penny arcade.
Interesting.
Okay. Although the coded entries, Edwards seemingly identifies himself as Short's killer, according to Cameron, who noted that in the FAQ section, the site's author wrote, in January of 47, I was 13 years old. Explaining the convoluted sounding Zodiac connection, Cameron said there are 2 cryptograms sent by the Zodiac Killer, one in 69 and one in 70. And he basically said, if you solve these puzzles, then you'll have my name. In 2010, when we confronted Ed Edwards about the Zodiac Killer, after we solved the 13-character cipher, Edward Edwards' name is 13 characters.
Okay.
And what he had done was taken the letters in his name, reverse imaged the letters as in like hieroglyphics, so one could never solve the Zodiac case without knowing the name Edward Edwards. Once we did confront him, he sent us a letter saying, it's me. You don't know the whole story. I have a lot to tell you. And that he framed people his whole life. That's what he wanted Cameron to know from the very beginning, was that he wanted Detective Cameron to know that he intended to frame somebody.
Okay.
So Cameron hopes that the documentary series called It Was Him, The Many Murders of Ed Edwards, is a 6-part series, ultimately sends a message that never be afraid of trying to find out the truth, because as scary as painful as it can be, the truth is still the truth. There are obviously going to be things that are in there that make you wonder what's 100% accurate or 100% true.
Right.
So we kind of I want to change the story here a little bit. So we have a detective that's been on this like manhunt and feeling like Ed Edwards is involved in a lot of these famous cases.
Yeah.
And this is like a name that nobody ever really hears about.
Right.
So he was really an unknown killer. But I want to discuss the fact that he was also a family man.
Oh,
He married Kay and had 5 children with her.
okay.
Edward's daughter wrote a book
Okay.
and detailed what it was like to live with a serial killer father.
Okay.
Um, and if it wasn't for his daughter, he may never have been arrested.
Okay.
In fact, the cases would have all just remained cold.
Okay.
His daughter is the one that pretty much turned him in.
Right.
So it was her in 2009 that opened the can of worms. She called Jefferson County Police Department to give them a tip about the cold case double homicides that led to his arrest and then ultimate sentencing.
Okay.
April Belisco, the eldest daughter of the 5 children Edward and Kay had together, recalls Edward as being abusive to her and her mother, but also remembers Edward as the kind father at times as well. For example, April went on to say when she was 2, she bit into an electric cord and ended up in the hospital. It was Edward who sat by her bedside, rocked her on his lap, and eventually brought her home, changed the bandages on her face each morning. She also said her dad was a cheerleader, coaching her in sports, officiating family games, driving her door to door to sell cookies so she can break the state records in local fundraising.
Okay.
She even recalls her siblings stealing sweets from a pharmacy. She said in her book, "My dad marched them right back and made them apologize and do chores for the guy who owned it to make amends. My dad probably stole from the same pharmacy, but he truly did not want us to grow up like he did. I actually look back at my childhood with fondness. This is probably a coping mechanism, but I try not to think about all the negative."
Okay.
So her book, Raised by a Serial Killer, describes the multiple homes and enchanting places, so she calls it. Some of these neglected houses with stained glass windows had secret passages, spiral staircases, was on land covered with mint and fruit trees, chickens, dogs,
So he was a.
cats, ponies. Her dad was always big on entourage, through parties, barbecues, celebrations. She even talked about in her book some passages about Christmas. He would completely do up the whole house, make everything look like spectacular, and at times would wake the kids up in the middle of the night to get them to open their presents because he couldn't wait till like the next day.
Okay.
So he was just like this heavily involved father that on one end seemed like this great community father. Everybody liked him. But then she remembers other parts of him. She had said that he had a violent side. He was controlling, abusive. She called it a hair trigger temper. She mentioned that he had actually broke her mother's jaw twice and stabbed April, apparently because she finished all the crisps, whatever the crisps are. She mentioned that they might be sitting down to dinner one minute, then picking it up off the floor the next. The magical houses they lived in often had no heating or running water, and wherever they went, April and her siblings were what she called Edward's band of children laborers. They were up ladders fixing roofs, on their knees scrubbing floors. More than once, he set fire to places before moving on. And unfortunately, it never always ended well for the animals either. She mentioned a dog hanged in the basement and a kitten hurled against the wall. By 18, April had enough, and she moved out, got a job, and never lived with her family again. Now we kind of looked to Kay a little bit. In the 1970s, they didn't have programs for the women that they do now of domestic abuse. April stated that she felt she was sure her mom was overwhelmed. She didn't have a job or a driver's license, had never worked outside the home, so what else was she going to do?
Right.
They didn't have rescue places for her to go to.
Gotcha.
It wasn't until the late 90s that April came to strongly suspect her father of murder. As she and her siblings had grown up and gone, Edwards had fostered Danny Boy, which was a friend of his youngest son.
Yep.
Danny Boy idolized Edwards, called him dad, taking his surname. April said in an interview she really believed my dad, I should quote it, I really believe my dad killed him. I just didn't know how to prove it. And I was busy raising my family. As her children grew, the questions about her father and her strange childhood grew too. By the time her kids were teenagers, she felt a dread that when they were out, especially in the evening, seemed wildly disproportionate. She was completely scared of her kids being gone.
Yeah.
And
I could see that.
it really led to the trauma that she lived.
Yeah.
And not really knowing, but suspecting.
Yep.
So all of this led her to the childhood timeline that she made, internet searches, and eventually her father's arrest.
Right. Yeah.
So
she kind of broke the case.
Right. As she put, by age 11, April understood that her father was not only a really, really bad father, but just a bad man in general.
Okay.
Her childhood haunted her as an adult, and she saw it as like a jigsaw puzzle I couldn't put together because there was too many missing pieces. We were poor, often hungry, moving from one dilapidated and filthy rental house to another, sometimes living in tents and campers, and once in a barn. They moved all the time. The places that she can remember was Ohio, Florida, Georgia, Arizona, Colorado, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, and sometimes cramming suddenly into a U-Haul truck with no warning.
Okay.
April did struggle with what she did, calling the tip that led to the arrest, and she didn't want to hurt her family. But as her kids were getting to the ages of Edward's victims, she also felt like she didn't want the victim's family to continue living without closure when she had a possibility of having some closure.
Right.
So that right now is the story of Edward Edwards. Now there is so much more. Like we could keep going on for like hours talking about this guy.
Right.
But we're not going to do that.
No.
Mainly my voice is going, and Nick looked like he wants to just go crawl in bed.
I'm surviving.
We both are trying to survive a little bit.
Yeah.
But I thought it'd be fun to discuss a little bit of a story that happened here in Wisconsin.
Yep.
And was very intrigued to find out that some people that I even knew working in Jefferson County were involved in this huge case. But it did not surprise me at all in any way whatsoever. And I don't work for them anymore, so I'm free to say they're terrible in investigations. It did not surprise me to know that Edwards got away and would have continued to get away had his daughter actually not turned him in.
Yeah.
Because Jefferson County does not do a good job of investigations. Their Health and Human Services are horrific. I wouldn't trust them further than I could throw a penny away from me. So it didn't surprise me to hear like he got away.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, shocker. Of course he did. So that is the story.
All right.
Of Edward. Do you have any questions of Edward?
No. Thank you for that interesting story.
Would you have turned your father in?
Depends. I mean,
that is a hard one that she had to live with. I mean, she did run it past her siblings too.
And
her siblings are like, don't open this can.
But the harm that's being done, is it better to turn him in, or is it worse? Like, then how do you live with that secret?
Right. I liked her viewpoint of if she knows something and here the victims' families are just sitting there going, why won't anybody talk?
Right.
Somebody knows something.
Yep.
And of course she didn't know at the time. She's just putting pieces together going, why is it every time there was a missing body somewhere that we lived, all of a sudden we left? Right. She knew something was up.
Yeah. So.
And I'm glad that she did turn them in. If you ever get a chance to see any of the episodes, the 6-part series, do watch it. I want to watch it.
Mm-hmm.
I also want to read how he's connected to some of these bigger cases. So we might recover some of this. Because I did want to get into the Zodiac Killer at some point. Yep. And Um, besides the 6-part series, the book,
Yes.
and then there's the book that his daughter wrote, April wrote.
Right.
That sounded very interesting to me.
Okay.
Raised by a serial killer. So lots of things to really look into on this case. That doesn't mean we're necessarily done.
No.
Which is kind of cool.
We could revisit it.
Absolutely.
So, well, thank you for presenting that. And that was very interesting.
Did you enjoy your drink?
Yes, I did.
Did you finish your drink?
Almost.
Okay.
Well,
Well, cheers to everybody on this just past St. Patrick's Day, like by
yes.
2 days. And cheers.
Yep.
Salancha.
We will have the next one ready for you. And thank you for listening. And like and subscribe. And we will catch you next week.
While the Phantom Pals with our shared illnesses,
Yep.
we'll be taking a little break.
Yes, we will.
Getting ready for our big investigation next
Yes.
weekend, which I cannot wait to share with you guys. It'll be fun. We'll definitely go live from there.
Yes. Actually, it's the end of the month. So, yeah, we will be going live.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yep. Next week.
yes. Soon.
We'll get better.
Man, in the car with you for how long?
This one I think is like 4 or 5 hours.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, we're listening to musicals.
Oh boy. All right.
And Britney Spears.
What? Well, at least you didn't say Taylor Swift.
I could.
Oh, you could. Okay. But, well, thank you for listening.
Yeah.
And make sure to like and subscribe.
Bye, guys.
Bye.